The blood on her hands was not her own, and that terrified Amelia O'Brien more than the three men who had just ridden into her small homestead with guns drawn and cruel smiles painted across their weathered faces. She had been preparing supper when they arrived, the late afternoon sun of August 1878 casting long shadows across the sparse grassland that surrounded her modest cabin near Manassas, Colorado. The knock on her door had been forceful, demanding, and when she opened it thinking perhaps a neighbor needed help, she found herself staring down the barrel of a revolver held by a man with a scar running from his left eye to his jawline. "Where is he?" the scarred man had demanded, his breath reeking of whiskey and tobacco. Amelia had stumbled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Where is who? I do not know what you mean." The man had laughed then, a sound devoid of humor, and pushed his way inside. Two others followed, both equally rough-looking, their spurs jingling against her clean wooden floor. "Do not play stupid with us, girl. Thorne Wolfe, the mountain man. We know he has been coming down from the high country to see you, been watching this place for 3 days now." The mention of Thorne's name had sent ice through her veins. She had met him 6 months ago when she was lost in a spring snowstorm, her horse having thrown her miles from town. He had appeared like something from a legend, tall and powerfully built with shoulder-length dark hair and a beard that could not hide the strong line of his jaw. His arms had been thick with muscle as he lifted her effortlessly onto his own horse, and his chest beneath his buckskin shirt had been solid as oak when she leaned against him for warmth during the ride to his cabin. He had nursed her back to health over 3 days, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone so large and imposing. She had learned he was a trapper and hunter who preferred the solitude of the mountains, a man who had left civilization behind after the war. But she had also seen the kindness in his gray eyes, the careful way he tended to her frostbitten fingers, the quiet strength that radiated from him like heat from a fire. When he brought her back to her homestead, she thought she might never see him again. But 2 weeks later, he appeared at her door with fresh meat and furs, asking gruffly if she needed anything. Then he came again, and again. Each visit longer than the last, until they would sit by her fire talking late into the night, and she began to realize that this solitary mountain man was slowly, carefully, opening his heart to her. "I have not seen him in weeks," Amelia lied to the scarred man, lifting her chin despite her fear. "He comes and goes as he pleases. I cannot tell you where he is." The leader had studied her with cold eyes, then nodded to one of his companions. "Tie her up. We will wait for him here. When he comes sniffing around his little sweetheart, we will be ready." "He will not come," Amelia insisted, even as rough hands grabbed her arms. "He could be anywhere in those mountains." "Oh, he will come," the scarred man said with certainty. "Men like Wolfe, they get attached to things, makes them weak, makes them predictable. My name is Carson Briggs, and your man killed my brother up in Wyoming territory last year, shot him dead when he caught him rustling horses. Now I aim to return the favor, but I want Wolfe to watch you die first. Then I will take my time with him." They had bound her hands and feet, stuffing a gag in her mouth when she tried to scream. But not before one of them had backhanded her across the face, splitting her lip and sending blood down her chin. The copper taste filled her mouth as they dragged her to her own bedroom and tied her to the bedpost. Hours passed. The sun set, painting the Colorado sky in shades of orange and purple. Through her small window, Amelia could see the first stars beginning to appear. The 3 men made themselves at home in her cabin, eating her food, drinking the whiskey she kept for medicine, their voices growing louder and more boisterous as the night deepened. She tested her bonds repeatedly, but whoever had tied them knew their craft. The rope bit into her wrists, and she could feel her fingers starting to tingle from lack of circulation. Tears leaked from her eyes, not from pain, but from fear. Not for herself, but for Thorne. She knew with absolute certainty that he would come. He had promised her he would check on her every week, and he was a man of his word. The thought of him walking into this trap made her stomach twist with nausea. She had to warn him somehow, had to find a way to escape or signal danger. But gagged and bound, helpless in her own bedroom while 3 killers waited in the next room, she had never felt more powerless in her 22 years of life. The night grew deeper. Through the thin walls she could hear the men's conversation turning to what they would do with her after they killed Thorne. The crude suggestions made her skin crawl, and she squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out their words. She thought instead of Thorne's hands, so large they could span her waist, but gentle when they touched her face. She thought of his voice, deep and rough from disuse, but softening when he spoke her name. She thought of the kiss they had shared just 2 weeks ago, the first kiss either of them had dared, his lips surprisingly soft against hers, his arms holding her as if she were something precious and fragile. "I am not a good man, Amelia," he had told her that night, his forehead resting against hers. "I have done things in the war, things after, that would make you turn from me if you knew." "Then tell me," she had whispered. "Tell me everything, and let me decide for myself." And he had. He told her about the battles, the men he had killed, the darkness that sometimes consumed him. He told her about returning home to find his family's farm burned, his parents dead, killed by raiders who had taken advantage of the chaos of war. He told her how he had tracked those men down, every single one, and made them pay. How he had then fled to the mountains, unable to bear the sight of civilization, the reminder of all he had lost. "But you make me want to try again," he had said, his gray eyes intense on hers. "You make me think maybe I could have a life beyond just surviving. Maybe I could have a home again, a family." The memory of those words made fresh tears fall. If he died because of her, because these men used her as bait, she did not know how she would live with that burden. Somewhere around midnight, the men's voices began to quiet. She heard one of them say they should take shifts keeping watch, but the response was slurred and dismissive. The whiskey had done its work. Within another hour, she heard snoring from the main room. Still she waited, her body aching from being in one position for so long. The moon had risen, casting silver light through her window. She must have dozed despite her fear, because suddenly she jolted awake, certain she had heard something. The cabin was silent except for the snores of the outlaws, but something had changed. The air felt different, charged with a tension that made the hair on her arms stand up despite her long sleeves. Then she saw him. Thorne appeared at her window like a ghost, his face barely visible in the moonlight. His eyes met hers through the glass, and even in the darkness she could see the cold fury burning in them. He held a finger to his lips, then, carefully, silently, began to work the window open. The old hinges could have betrayed him, but he moved with such patient slowness that not a sound emerged. When the window was open wide enough, he reached through and began working on her bonds. His knife was razor sharp, and within seconds her hands were free. He cut the gag away next, and she gasped in a full breath, her jaw aching from being forced open so long. "Can you walk?" His voice was barely a whisper, his lips close to her ear. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He cut the ropes around her ankles, then lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all, passing her through the window with the same careful silence he had used entering. Once she was outside, he followed, his large frame moving with surprising grace for a man of his size. He set her on her feet, but kept one arm around her waist when her legs threatened to give out. Her circulation was returning in painful tingles, but she bit her lip to keep from making a sound. Thorne guided her away from the cabin, moving like a shadow across the moonlit ground. She could see his horse waiting in a small grove of cottonwood trees about 50 yards from her home, along with her own mare that the outlaws had stabled in her small barn. They had nearly reached the horses when a shout split the night. "She is gone! The girl is gone!" Thorne cursed under his breath and swept Amelia up into his arms, running the last distance to the horses. He practically threw her onto her mare, then mounted his own horse in one fluid motion. "Ride!" he commanded, and she did not need to be told twice. They thundered away from the homestead, the sounds of pursuit rising behind them. Gunshots cracked through the night, but Thorne had them riding in a zigzag pattern that made them difficult targets in the darkness. Amelia leaned low over her mare's neck, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "Stay with me," Thorne called to her, his voice carrying over the sound of hoofbeats. "We are heading into the high country. They will not follow us there." She did not waste breath responding, focusing all her energy on keeping her seat as they rode through the night. Behind them, the outlaws' shouts grew fainter, but did not disappear entirely. They were being pursued, and she knew those men would not give up easily. They rode for what felt like hours, climbing steadily into the foothills of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The terrain grew rougher, the path less defined, but Thorne never hesitated. He knew this land like other men knew their own homes, guiding them through the darkness with absolute confidence. Finally, as the first gray light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, Thorne slowed his horse and turned to check on her. "How are you holding up?" "I am well enough," she managed, though in truth she was exhausted, sore, and still shaking with delayed fear. "Are we safe?" "For now. We have a good lead on them, and once we get higher, they will lose our trail. I know places they will never find." He guided his horse closer to hers, reaching out to gently touch her bruised face. His jaw tightened when he saw the dried blood on her lip. "Did they hurt you?" "Not beyond this," she assured him quickly. "They were waiting for you. They wanted to use me to lure you out." "I know. I saw them watching your place yesterday. That is why I waited until full dark and came in quiet." His gray eyes were hard as flint in the growing light. "Carson Briggs. I recognize him from his wanted poster. He is wanted in 3 territories for murder and robbery." "He said you killed his brother." "I did. Man was a horse thief and worse. Tried to shoot me in the back when I caught him with stolen stock. I gave him more of a chance than he deserved." Thorne's hand cupped her face gently, a sharp contrast to the violence in his words. "I am sorry, Amelia. I never meant to bring danger to your door." "You did not bring it. They did." She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. "You saved me. How did you know they were there?" "Saw their horses hidden near your property when I was approaching yesterday afternoon. 3 horses, 3 men. I circled around and watched, saw them go into your cabin and not come out. I knew something was wrong." His thumb brushed across her uninjured cheek. "I waited until they settled in for the night, until they got careless with your whiskey. Then I came for you. They will keep hunting us. Let them try. Up in the high country, I have the advantage, but we need to keep moving. Can you ride further?" Amelia nodded, though every muscle in her body protested the thought. "Where are we going?" "My cabin. It's another few hours from here, but it is well hidden and defensible. We will be safe there while I figure out what to do about Briggs and his men." They rode on as the sun climbed higher, the air growing thinner as they ascended. Amelia had never been this far into the mountains. The landscape was breathtaking and harsh in equal measure, with towering peaks of gray stone rising above thick forests of pine and aspen. The August morning was cool at this elevation, and she was grateful for her shawl despite her exertion. Thorne led them along paths that were barely visible, sometimes dismounting to lead the horses through particularly treacherous sections. He would lift Amelia down when necessary, his hands spanning her waist, and she was always struck by how careful he was with his strength. This man, who could probably break another man in half with his bare hands, touched her as if she were made of spun glass. Around mid-morning, they stopped at a small stream to water the horses and rest briefly. Amelia's legs nearly gave out when she dismounted, and Thorne caught her, frowning with concern. "You are pushing yourself too hard." "I will be fine. We need to keep going. We have time for you to rest. They are hours behind us, if they are even still following." He guided her to sit on a fallen log, then knelt before her, his hands running down her legs to check for injuries. "Your ankles are bruised from the ropes. It could be worse." Much worse, and she knew it. If Thorne had not come when he did, if he had not moved with such stealth and skill, she would either be dead or wishing she were. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming for me." His eyes met hers, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. "Did you think I would not? Did you think anything in this world could have kept me from you? I was afraid they would kill you." "They can try." He rose, then sat beside her on the log, his arm coming around her shoulders to pull her against his side. "I have survived worse than Carson Briggs and his gang, but the thought of them hurting you, of using you to get to me, that is something I cannot abide." She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling safe for the first time since the outlaws had invaded her home. "I think I am beginning to understand why you left civilization behind. People can be truly terrible to each other." "Some people," he agreed, "but not all. You are proof of that. Amelia, you are proof that there is still goodness in this world, still something worth protecting." They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the stream bubble over rocks and the horses crop grass nearby. Then Thorne gently tilted her face up to his and kissed her, soft and careful of her injured lip. It was a kiss full of relief and promise, and when he pulled back, his eyes were softer than she had ever seen them. "When this is over," he said quietly. When Briggs and his men are no longer a threat, I want to ask you something important, but I will not do it now, not while you are running for your life because of me. Just know that I am thinking it. Know that you mean everything to me. Her heart swelled until she thought it might burst. Thorne. Later, he said, pressing a finger to her lips, when I can do it properly, when I can offer you a future instead of just running. He stood, offering her his hand. Come on, we have a few more hours to go. The rest of the ride tested Amelia's endurance to its limits. The path grew steeper, the air thinner, and several times she had to focus simply on not falling from her saddle. But Thorne was always there, checking on her, encouraging her, and somehow his presence made the impossible seem manageable. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, they rounded a bend, and she saw it. A cabin built into the side of the mountain, constructed of logs and stone, with a small corral beside it and a lean-to shelter for the horses. Smoke drifted from the chimney, which confused her until she realized he must have left a fire banked when he departed. Home, Thorne said simply, and there was something in his voice that made the words sound like a prayer. He helped her down from her horse, and this time when her legs gave out, he simply swept her up into his arms and carried her inside. The cabin was larger than she expected, a single great room with a sleeping area separated by a heavy curtain, a kitchen area with a well-made table and chairs, and a massive stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Furs covered the floor, and the walls were hung with various tools and weapons. It was rustic, but clean, and undeniably masculine in character. Thorne laid her on his bed, which was surprisingly comfortable, the mattress stuffed with something soft and covered with more furs. Rest, he commanded. I will tend to the horses and then see to your injuries. I can help. Rest, he repeated more firmly, and she was too exhausted to argue further. She must have fallen asleep immediately, because the next thing she knew, Thorne was gently shaking her awake. The light coming through the window had deepened to late afternoon gold, and the smell of something cooking made her stomach growl audibly. Come, he said, helping her sit up. You need to eat, and I want to clean those rope burns. She let him lead her to the table, where he had set out a simple but hearty meal of venison stew and fresh bread that surprised her. You bake? When I have the time and ingredients. Turns out I like bread. He almost smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Sit, eat first, then I will play doctor. The stew was delicious, rich and savory, and she ate 2 full bowls before finally pushing back from the table. Thorne ate even more, but she had learned that a man of his size needed substantial fuel. When they were finished, he brought out a basin of warm water and clean cloth, along with a small tin of salve. He was as gentle tending her rope burns as he had been with her frostbite months ago, his large hands incredibly careful as he cleaned and dressed her wrists and ankles. When he was done, he examined her bruised face, his jaw tightening again at the sight. I should have killed them, he said quietly. Then you would have had to fight all 3, and they would have shot you before you got close. You did the right thing, getting me out quietly. She caught his hand, holding it against her unmarked cheek. You saved my life, Thorne. That is what matters. He was quiet for a moment, then pulled his hand away and stood, pacing to the window to look out at the darkening mountains. They will not stop, you know. Men like Briggs, they do not let go of a grudge. And now I have taken you from them, embarrassed them. They will want revenge even more. So what do? We stay here while I scout and plan. These mountains are my territory. I know every trail, every pass, every place a man could hide or be ambushed. If they are stupid enough to follow us up here, I will deal with them on my terms. He turned to look at her, his expression hard. But I will not lie to you, Amelia. This could get bloody. These are not good men, and they will not hesitate to kill either of us if they get the chance. I trust you. And she did, completely. This man had proven himself in every way that mattered. What can I do to help? Stay safe. Stay here where I know you are protected. Let me handle this. At her protest, he held up a hand. I know you are not helpless. I know you are strong and capable, but I cannot fight them and worry about you at the same time. Please, Amelia, let me do this. She wanted to argue, but she could see the plea in his eyes and knew he was right. All right. But promise me you will be careful. Promise me you will come back. I promise. He crossed back to her and pulled her up into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. She could hear his heart beating, strong and steady, and wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid muscle of his back beneath her hands. I have something worth coming back to now. That makes all the difference. They stood like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other. Then, Thorne reluctantly released her and began to prepare for the coming confrontation. He cleaned and loaded his rifles, sharpened his knives, and gathered supplies. Amelia watched, feeling helpless but trying not to show it. As night fell, Thorne made them another meal, and they ate by firelight. The cabin felt warm and safe, a pocket of peace in a dangerous world. After they ate, Thorne banked the fire and came to sit beside her on the bed. "You should sleep," he said. "You have been through hell in the last day." "Where will you sleep?" "I will keep watch tonight. Make sure they have not somehow followed us this far." "Thorne, you need rest too." "I will rest when this is over." But at her stubborn expression, he relented slightly. "All right, a few hours, but if I hear anything at all, I will be up." He lay down on the bed beside her, and after a moment's hesitation, Amelia curled into his side, her head on his chest. His arm came around her, holding her close, and despite everything, she felt safe. His free hand stroked her hair gently, a soothing rhythm that began to lull her toward sleep. "Thorne," she murmured. Yes? That question you want to ask me later. You do not have to wait. I already know my answer." She felt his chest rise and fall with a deep breath. "You do not know what I am going to ask." "Yes, I do. And the answer is yes. It has always been yes from the moment you carried me into your cabin during that snowstorm, and I saw the man you truly are beneath all the rough edges and solitude." His hand stilled in her hair. "Amelia, I am not an easy man. I have darkness in me. There are days when the memories come back and I am not fit company for anyone. I live up here in the mountains far from civilization. I cannot offer you the life you had, the community, the comforts." "You can offer me yourself," she interrupted. "That is all I need. That is all I've ever needed. I do not care about comforts or civilization. I care about you, about building a life with someone who sees me, truly sees me, and wants me anyway. That is what you do. Thorne, you see me." He was quiet for so long she thought perhaps she had said too much, pushed too hard, but then he tilted her face up to his and kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "Then when this is over," he whispered against her lips, "I will ask you properly, and we will do this right. I will marry you, Amelia O'Brien, if you will have a broken mountain man who somehow got lucky enough to find you." "I will have you," she promised, "in any way you come, for however long we have." They lay together in the darkness, wrapped in each other's arms, and eventually exhaustion claimed them both. Amelia slept deeply for the first time since the outlaws had invaded her home, safe in the knowledge that the man beside her would do everything in his power to protect her. She woke to gray dawn light and the sound of Thorne moving quietly around the cabin. He was already dressed, his rifle slung over his shoulder and his knife at his belt. When he saw she was awake, he came over and sat on the edge of the bed. "I am going out to scout," he told her. "See if they are following, and if so, where they are. I will be back by midday." Fear clutched at her heart, but she pushed it down. "Be careful." "Always." He kissed her forehead, then her lips, lingering for a moment. "There is food prepared on the table. The rifle above the door is loaded. If anyone comes who is not me, you shoot first and ask questions later. Understand?" "I understand." "Good girl." He stood, then paused at the door. "I meant what I said last night. When this is over, we're doing this properly. I am making you my wife, and nothing is going to stop that." Then he was gone, slipping out into the early morning and closing the door quietly behind him. Amelia lay still for a moment, then forced herself up. She could not just lie here worrying. She needed to stay busy. She spent the morning cleaning the cabin, which did not need much work, but gave her something to focus on. She found his spare clothes and mended tears in shirts and trousers, discovering that he had been making do with poor stitching for far too long. She organized his supplies, took inventory of his food stores, and even attempted to make more bread using his simple recipe. The hours crawled by. Every sound made her jump, every distant bird cry made her reach for the rifle, but nothing came, and as the sun climbed toward its zenith, she began to relax slightly. Then she heard it, the sound of a horse approaching. She grabbed the rifle, her heart hammering, and positioned herself by the window where she could see out, but remain partially hidden. The rider came into view, and relief flooded through her as she recognized Thorne's powerful form on his dark horse. She set the rifle down and opened the door as he dismounted. His expression was grim. "They are following," he said without preamble. "3 of them, about 5 miles back. They are having a hard time of it. Their horses are not suited for this terrain, but they are persistent. They are following our trail." "What do we do?" "I'm going to convince them to turn back." The flat tone of his voice made clear how he intended to do that. "Tonight. I know where they will camp. There's only one good spot between here and where they are now. I will go to them." That is too dangerous. 3 against 1. 3 men sleeping in the open against 1 man who knows the land and can move without sound. I like my odds. He cupped her face in his hands. "I need to end this, Amelia. As long as they are hunting us, neither of us can go home. You cannot return to your homestead. I cannot take you anywhere safe. This ends tonight." She knew he was right, but that did not make it easier. "Promise me you will not take unnecessary risks." "I promise I will do what needs to be done and come back to you. That is the best I can offer." She nodded, blinking back tears. "Then that will have to be enough." They spent the rest of the day together, both of them aware it could be their last. Thorne showed her around his property, the garden he kept that surprised her, the small forge where he repaired tools and made nails, the cold spring that provided fresh water year-round. He showed her the places he had made comfortable over his years of solitude, and she began to see how a life here could work, how 2 people could build something lasting in this remote place. As the sun set, he made them a final meal together, and they ate slowly, savoring every moment. When it was full dark, he began his preparations. "I will leave in an hour," he told her. "Give them time to settle in and get comfortable. I should be back before dawn." "And if you are not?" "Then you take my horse and you ride for Manasseh. Go to the sheriff, tell him everything. He knows me, knows I am not a criminal. He will help you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "But I will be back. I swear it." When it was time, he kissed her one last time, long and deep, as if he were memorizing the taste of her. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness like a ghost, and she was alone. The wait was agony. She tried to sleep but could not. She paced the cabin, started a dozen different tasks, and abandoned them all. She prayed, though she had not prayed in years, bargaining with God for Thorne's safe return. The night stretched on endlessly. Every sound made her freeze, listening for hoofbeats or gunshots. But the mountains were silent except for the wind through the pines and the occasional call of a night bird. Then, as the sky began to lighten with the approaching dawn, she heard it. A single horse approaching. She grabbed the rifle again, her hands shaking, and took up her position by the window. It was Thorne. He was slumped in the saddle, and even in the dim light, she could see blood on his shirt. She dropped the rifle and ran outside, reaching him just as he began to slide from his horse. "I am all right," he said, though his voice was strained. "Flesh wound. Looks worse than it is." "You are bleeding." She helped him into the cabin, her heart in her throat. There was so much blood. Too much blood. One of them woke up. "Got a shot off before I could stop him. Bullet grazed my side, that is all." He let her help him to the chair by the table, then looked up at her with those gray eyes she loved. "It is done, Amelia. Briggs and his men will not be bothering anyone anymore." "What happened?" "They are dead, all 3. I gave them a chance to leave, to turn back. Briggs drew on me instead. The other 2 followed his lead." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I did what had to be done." She could see the weight of it on him, the cost of taking lives even when necessary. Without a word, she began to remove his shirt, needing to see the wound. It was a deep graze along his ribs, bleeding freely but not life-threatening. She cleaned it with shaking hands, then bandaged it as best she could. "You need a doctor." "I have had worse. I will heal." He caught her hand. "I am sorry you had to see me like this. Sorry you have to know what I did. You protected us. You did what was necessary." She knelt before him, looking up into his face. "I do not judge you for it, Thorne. I cannot. Those men would have killed us both without a moment's hesitation." "You are too good for me," he said quietly. "Too good for a man with blood on his hands. No, I am exactly right for you. And you are exactly right for me." She stood, then carefully straddled his lap, mindful of his injury. "We are both survivors, Thorne. We both do what we must to protect the people we love. There is no shame in that." He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, and she felt the tremor that ran through his body, the aftermath of violence, of surviving. She held him in return, letting him take what comfort he needed from her presence. It is over," she whispered. "It is finally over." "Yes," he pulled back to look at her. "And now we can have that conversation I promised you. Thorne, you are injured. We should wait." "No more waiting. I have waited long enough." He stood, lifting her with him, then set her gently on her feet. Then, to her shock, he dropped to one knee before her, taking her hand in both of his. "Amelia O'Brien," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I am not a man of pretty words or smooth ways. I'm rough around the edges, set in my solitary habits, and I carry darkness that may never fully leave me. But you have brought light into my life. You have given me hope that I can be more than just a man surviving in the wilderness. You have made me want to truly live again. Would you do me the greatest honor of my life and agree to be my wife?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He stood and kissed her, and this kiss was different from all the others. This kiss was a promise, a commitment, a beginning. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and his eyes held a heat that made her shiver. "We should get you to bed," she said. "You need to rest and heal." "Later," he said. "First, I need you to know how much you mean to me. I need you to understand that I am yours, completely, from this moment forward." "I already know," she assured him. "I have always known." The next weeks were a time of healing and planning. Thorne's wound closed cleanly, though he would bear the scar for the rest of his life. They made the trip down to Manassas together to report what had happened with Briggs and his gang. The sheriff, a weathered man named Buck Morrison, who had known Thorne for years, accepted his account without question. The Outlaws had been wanted men, and their deaths would not be mourned. While in town, they also arranged for a wedding. The local minister, a kind man named Reverend Thompson, agreed to perform the ceremony in his small church. Amelia wrote to her sister in Kansas, the only family she had left, to share the news. She invited her to the wedding, though she knew the distance and expense made attendance unlikely. They returned to Thorne's mountain cabin to prepare. Amelia had decisions to make about her own homestead. The cabin was still standing, and her modest possessions were still inside. Thorne suggested they keep it, use it as a base when they needed to come to town for supplies or during the worst of the winter when the mountain passes became impassable. "But this is home," he told her, gesturing to his cabin. "This is where I want to build our life. Is that acceptable to you?" She looked around at the solid cabin, the magnificent view of the mountains, the sense of peace and isolation that pervaded the place. "It is more than acceptable. It is perfect." They spent their days making the cabin ready for a woman's permanent presence. Thorne built her a proper dressing table and more storage for clothes. He added hooks on the wall for her things and cleared space in his orderly kingdom for her to make her own mark. She, in turn, added softness to the masculine space, curtains for the windows, a tablecloth for the table, wildflowers in a jar on the sill. Their wedding day came on a clear September morning, with autumn just beginning to paint the aspen trees gold. Amelia wore a simple dress of pale blue that Thorne had insisted on buying for her in Manassas, saying she deserved something new and special. He wore his best clothes, his hair trimmed and beard neatly shaped, though he still looked more mountain man than gentleman. She would not have wanted him any other way. To her surprise and delight, her sister Sarah had made the journey after all, arriving the day before the wedding with her husband and 2 young children. The reunion was tearful and joyous, and having family there to witness her marriage meant more to Amelia than she could express. The ceremony was small but beautiful. Besides Sarah's family, a few of Thorne's acquaintances from town attended, including Sheriff Morrison and an old trapper named Silas, who had taught Thorne the ways of the mountains when he first arrived years ago. When Reverend Thompson asked if Thorne took Amelia to be his wife, his "I do" rang out clear and strong, no hesitation, no doubt. And when he kissed his bride, there were tears in his eyes that he did not try to hide. The reception was held at Amelia's homestead, which was more accessible than the mountain cabin. The community had contributed food and drink, and there was music and dancing as the afternoon sun warmed the September air. Amelia danced with her new husband, his arms strong around her, and felt happier than she had ever been. "I never thought I would have this," Thorne murmured in her ear as they swayed together. "Never thought I deserved it." "You deserve every happiness," she told him firmly, "and I intend to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." As the sun set, they said their goodbyes and made the ride back up to their mountain home. Thorne had gone up the day before to prepare, and when he carried his new wife over the threshold, she gasped. He had transformed the cabin. Candles lit the space, casting a warm glow over everything. Fresh flowers decorated the table and windowsills. The bed had been made with new linens, soft and clean, and more furs had been added for warmth. It was rustic still, but beautiful in its simplicity. "Thorne," she breathed, "it is wonderful." "You are wonderful," he corrected, setting her down gently. "And you are mine now, my wife. I still cannot quite believe it." She turned to face him, reaching up to cup his bearded face in her hands. "Believe it, we are married and this is our beginning. Whatever comes, we will face it together." That night, they truly became husband and wife in every sense, and Amelia discovered that the gentleness Thorne showed her in all things extended to their marriage bed. He was patient and careful with her innocence, making sure her pleasure matched his own, and when they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, she felt complete in a way she never had before. "I love you," she told him, the first time she had said the words aloud, though her actions had been speaking them for months. "I love you," he replied, his voice rough with emotion, "more than I have words for. You are my heart, Amelia, my reason for everything." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, the mountain wind whistling softly outside, and both of them knew they had finally found where they belonged. The months that followed were a period of adjustment and discovery. Amelia learned the rhythms of mountain life, the demands of the seasons, the skills needed to thrive in such a remote place. Thorne was a patient teacher, showing her how to tan hides, preserve meat, identify edible and medicinal plants. She proved an apt student, and her contribution to their household made their life easier and more prosperous. Winter came early that year, the first snow falling in late October. But by then they were prepared, their larder full, their woodpile high, and their cabin snug against the cold. They spent the long winter nights by the fire, talking and reading, Amelia working on sewing projects while Thorne carved or repaired equipment. Sometimes they would simply sit in comfortable silence, content in each other's company. It was during those winter months that Amelia first suspected she might be carrying a child. By January, she was certain. She chose the evening when the snow was falling softly outside, and Thorne was sitting by the fire to tell him. "I have something to share with you," she said, setting aside her mending. He looked up, immediately attentive to the serious note in her voice. "What is it?" "I'm with child. We're going to have a baby, likely sometime in late summer." She watched his face carefully, uncertain how he would react. They had not discussed children, had not planned this, but his expression transformed, wonder and joy spreading across his rugged features. "A baby?" He stood and crossed to her, dropping to his knees beside her chair. "Truly? Truly? Are you pleased?" "Pleased?" He laughed, the sound rich and full. "Amelia, I am beyond pleased. I am terrified and excited and more grateful than I can express." His large hand settled gently on her still flat stomach. "A child. Our child." "You will be a wonderful father," she assured him, covering his hand with hers. "I hope so. I pray so." He looked up at her, and she saw the fear beneath his joy. "I never had much example to follow. My own father died when I was young, but I swear I will do everything in my power to be the father this child deserves. I know you will. You are already proving it by caring so much." The rest of that winter seemed to fly by, both of them wrapped up in plans for the baby. Thorne began working on a cradle, carving it from pine and sanding it smooth with infinite patience. Amelia started sewing tiny clothes, marveling at how small they seemed. Spring came, and with it, new life throughout the mountains. As Amelia's body changed and grew, so too did their excitement. Thorne became even more protective than usual, insisting she not overexert herself, making sure she had the best cuts of meat and the freshest vegetables from their garden. In early May, they made the journey down to Manassas so Amelia could be examined by the town's doctor, an elderly man named Dr. Hartwell, who had delivered half the babies in the county. He pronounced her healthy and the baby strong, though he cautioned that she should plan to come to town for the birth. "The mountain is no place to have your first child," he told them firmly. "Too many things can go wrong, and you are too far from help. Come down in August and stay at your other cabin. I will attend you there." Thorne agreed immediately, unwilling to take any risks with Amelia's life. They made arrangements to move to the lower cabin in early August, giving themselves plenty of time before the baby's arrival. Summer arrived warm and golden. Amelia grew round with child, blooming in a way that made Thorne tell her daily how beautiful she was. Despite her expanding waistline, she remained active, helping with the garden and the daily chores, though Thorne had taken over many of the heavier tasks. In the evenings, they would sit outside and watch the sun set over the peaks, talking about their future, about the kind of life they wanted to build for their family. Thorne shared his dreams of expanding their trapping business, maybe buying more land. Amelia talked about wanting to teach their children to read, to appreciate both the wilderness and the wider world beyond it. "I want them to have choices," she said one night, her hand resting on her belly where the baby was kicking energetically. "To know they can make their own way, whatever that may be." "They will," Thorne promised. "We will make sure of it. Any child of ours will know they are loved and supported no matter what path they choose." In early August, as planned, they moved down to Amelia's original homestead. It felt strange to be back after so many months in the mountain cabin, but also comforting in its familiarity. Thorne set about making repairs and improvements he had been planning, preparing the cabin for the birth and for the weeks after when Amelia would need to recover. The baby came on a hot afternoon in late August, 3 weeks past when Dr. Hartwell had expected. Amelia's labor started just after noon, and by the time Thorne rode frantically into town to fetch the doctor, the pains were coming hard and fast. "Doctor," Hartwell made excellent time, but even so, by the time he arrived, Amelia was far along. Thorne paced outside like a caged animal, terrified by the sounds coming from the cabin, feeling helpless in a way he had never experienced. All his strength and skill were useless here. He could not fight this battle for her, could not protect her from this pain. It seemed like an eternity, though later the doctor told him the labor had been relatively quick for a first baby. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard it, the sharp cry of a newborn. He was through the door before the sound had even faded, desperate to see his wife. Amelia lay exhausted in the bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but she was smiling, and in her arms was a tiny bundle, wrapped in the blanket she had stitched herself. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Thorne approached as if in a dream, his eyes fixed on the baby. When he reached the bedside, Amelia pulled back the blanket to reveal a red, wrinkled face and a shock of dark hair. The baby's eyes were squeezed shut, his tiny fists waving in the air. "A son," Thorne breathed. He reached out with one massive finger and gently touched the baby's hand. Immediately, tiny fingers wrapped around his, gripping with surprising strength. Something in Thorne's chest cracked open, a rush of emotion so powerful it brought him to his knees beside the bed. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you for this gift." "What shall we name him?" she asked, watching her husband with tender eyes. They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, unable to settle on one. But now, looking at his son's face, Thorne knew. "Thomas," he said. "Thomas William, after my father and yours." "Thomas William Wolfe," Amelia said, testing it out. "It is perfect. Hello, Tommy. Welcome to the world, little one." The next weeks were a blur of exhaustion and wonder. The baby needed constant care, waking every few hours to feed, and both new parents stumbled through learning how to care for such a tiny, fragile life. But Thorne took to fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with a fussy baby in the middle of the night and gazing at his son with an expression of such pure love, it made Amelia's heart ache. "You are a natural," she told him one night, watching him rock Tommy to sleep with infinite gentleness. "I am terrified every moment that I will do something wrong," he admitted. "He is so small, so vulnerable. But I have never loved anything the way I love him. Except you." "We are doing well," she assured him. "Look at him. He is healthy and growing. We must be doing something right." As autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and red, they made the decision to return to their mountain cabin. Tommy was thriving, and both of them yearned for their true home. Dr. Hartwell gave his approval, with strict instructions to come down immediately if there were any concerns. The journey up the mountain with a baby was more challenging than their previous trips, requiring frequent stops for feeding and changing. But when they finally rode into the clearing and saw their cabin waiting for them, both felt a deep sense of rightness. This was where they belonged. This was home. That winter was harder than the previous one, the demands of a baby making everything more complicated. But it was also infinitely richer. Tommy's first smile, his first laugh, the way he would reach for his father when Thorne came in from checking traps, all of it filled their lives with joy. As spring approached and Tommy grew from newborn to baby, beginning to show his own personality, Amelia and Thorne would often sit together in the evenings and marvel at how much their lives had changed. "2 years ago, I was alone in these mountains, certain I would live and die without ever connecting to another person again," Thorne said one night, Tommy sleeping on his chest. "Now look at us. A wife who loves me despite all my flaws. A son who will grow up knowing his father is there for him. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." "We have been blessed," Amelia agreed. "But we have also worked for this. We fought for this. Those outlaws could have destroyed everything, but we survived. We refused to let fear and violence steal our future." "Because of you," Thorne insisted. "Your strength, your courage. I came for you that night, but you are the one who has saved me every day since. You are my salvation, Amelia." "And you are mine," she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We saved each other." The years passed, bringing changes and growth. Tommy grew from baby to toddler to small boy, energetic and curious about everything around him. Thorne taught him about the mountains, about tracking and trapping, about respecting the land that sustained them. Amelia taught him to read and write, to do his numbers, filling the gaps in his education that their isolated life might otherwise create. When Tommy was 3, Amelia became pregnant again. This time she gave birth to a daughter, a tiny girl with her mother's dark auburn hair and her father's gray eyes. They named her Elizabeth, after Amelia's mother, and she proved to be as different from her boisterous brother as could be. Where Tommy was all energy and noise, Elizabeth was quiet and thoughtful, content to sit and observe the world around her. 2 years later came another son, Samuel, who seemed to combine the best traits of both siblings. The cabin that had once housed a solitary mountain man now rang with the sounds of children's laughter and play. As the children grew, so did Thorne and Amelia's dreams for their future. They expanded their property, buying adjacent land when it became available. They built a larger cabin to accommodate their growing family, though they kept the original as a guest house for when Amelia's sister visited with her own expanding brood. Thorne's trapping business became legendary in the region, his furs sought after for their quality. But he never let work consume him the way it might have in his bachelor days. His family came first, always. He made sure to be present for every important moment in his children's lives, teaching them, playing with them, showing them in 1,000 ways that they were loved and valued. Amelia became known in Manasseh as a healer, her knowledge of medicinal plants and remedies growing with each passing year. People would make the journey up the mountain to seek her help, and she never turned anyone away. She taught Elizabeth her skills, passing on the knowledge to the next generation. The children grew, and time seemed to accelerate. Tommy at 10 was already taller than his mother, and showing signs of inheriting his father's powerful build. Elizabeth at 7 could identify every plant on the mountain and knew which ones could heal and which could harm. Samuel at 5 was fearless, climbing trees and exploring with an enthusiasm that gave his parents constant worry and pride in equal measure. Through it all, Thorne and Amelia's love deepened and matured. They had their arguments, their difficult days, the struggles that came with any marriage, but they never lost sight of what they had, never took for granted the miracle of finding each other against all odds. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Thorne took Amelia back to the spot where he had proposed, a beautiful overlook with a view of the entire valley. The children were spending the weekend with Amelia's sister, giving the couple rare time alone. 10 years, Thorne marveled, his arm around his wife's waist as they watched the sun set over the mountains. Sometimes it feels like yesterday you were standing at my door during that snowstorm. Other times it feels like we have always been together. I cannot imagine my life without you, Amelia said. Cannot remember who I was before you, though I suppose that girl who lived alone in that homestead was brave in her own way. She was incredibly brave and strong and stubborn. He smiled, the expression coming more easily now after years of practice. All the things I love about you. The outlaws who took me thought they could use my feelings for you against us both, Amelia reflected. They thought love made us weak, but they were wrong. Our love made us stronger. Strong enough to survive, to fight, to build this life. Best decision I ever made coming for you that night, Thorne said, though I'm not sure I really chose it. The moment I realized you were in danger, there was no question. I would have fought through hell itself to get to you. I know. I've always known. She turned in his arms to face him. That is what love is it not? The willingness to fight through hell for someone, the commitment to stand beside them no matter what comes. Then we have it in spades, Mrs. Wolfe. He kissed her, soft and sweet, the kiss of a man who knew exactly how fortunate he was. Here is to the next 10 years, and the 10 after that, and however many more we are blessed to have. To the rest of our lives, Amelia agreed. Together. They stood there as the stars emerged overhead, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. The mountain wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. Years continued to pass in their mountain sanctuary. Tommy grew into a young man, tall and powerfully built like his father, with his mother's quick mind and kind heart. At 19, he announced his intention to marry a girl from Manasseh, a rancher's daughter named Catherine, who could ride and shoot as well as any man. Thorne and Amelia gave their blessing gladly, seeing in the young couple the same intense connection they themselves shared. Elizabeth at 16 had become a renowned healer, people coming from 3 counties away to seek her help. She was in no hurry to marry, she told her parents, too fascinated by her studies of medicine to think about romance. Amelia understood, though she suspected it was only a matter of time before someone captured her thoughtful daughter's heart. Samuel at 14 was already talking about exploring beyond the mountains, about seeing the wider world. Thorne encouraged him, knowing his son needed to find his own path, even if it led away from home. The knowledge that his children felt secure enough to dream of their own futures was proof that he and Amelia had done something right. On a warm summer evening when Tommy was 20 and preparing for his own wedding, the entire family gathered for supper at the big cabin. The table that Thorne had built to accommodate his growing family was full, laughter and conversation flowing as freely as the food. Watching her husband at the head of the table, their children around him, Amelia felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. This life, this family, this love, it had all started with a mountain man brave enough to walk quietly into danger to save the woman he loved. That night, after the children had gone to their own cabins and the house was quiet, Thorne found Amelia standing on the porch, looking out at the mountains silvered by moonlight. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "That night," she said softly, "when the outlaws took me. How terrified I was. How certain I was that I would die. You did not die. We survived. We won. We did more than survive. We thrived. We built this beautiful life from the ashes of that violence." She turned in his arms. "I think about the girl I was, tied up and helpless, and I wish I could tell her that everything would be all right, that the mountain man would come for her, that he would spend the rest of his life proving that love is stronger than fear, that gentleness can coexist with strength, that broken people can heal each other and build something whole." "I think she knew," Thorne said quietly. I think even then, tied up in her own bedroom with killers in the next room, she knew I would come, just as I knew I would find a way to get her out safely. How did we get so lucky? It was not luck. It was choice. Every day we choose each other. Choose this life. Choose love over anger, hope over despair, togetherness over solitude. He cupped her face in his hands, those same hands that had untied her bonds all those years ago. I would do it all again, Amelia. Every moment, every choice, every risk. For you. Always for you. She kissed him then, deep and long, a kiss that held 20 years of love and partnership and shared joy. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. "Come to bed, husband," she said. "Tomorrow is another day in this beautiful life we built." "Coming, wife," he replied, and hand in hand they walked back into their home. The mountains stood eternal around them, silent witnesses to a love story that began in terror and transformed into something beautiful. A solitary mountain man who learned to open his heart, a brave woman who refused to let fear define her future. Together, they had created a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone, passed down through their children and their children's children. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the violence that had brought them together, but the choice to build something better. Not the darkness of their pasts, but the light they created together. Not the outlaws who tried to destroy them, but the love that proved stronger than hate. The story of Thorne and Amelia Wolfe became legend in that part of Colorado. People spoke of the mountain man who walked into an outlaw camp alone and emerged victorious. They told of the woman who waited bravely for her love to return. They marveled at the family that thrived in the high country, generation after generation choosing to stay in the place where their love began. But for Thorne and Amelia themselves, it was simpler than legend. It was a choice, made fresh each morning when they woke beside each other. A choice to love, to trust, to build, to hope. And that choice, repeated day after day, year after year, became the foundation of a life neither had imagined possible. Years later, when they were old and gray, their children grown with families of their own, Thorne and Amelia would sit together on their porch and watch the sunset over the mountains that had been their home for so long. They did not need many words anymore. After 5 decades together, a look or a touch said everything that needed saying. "Do you have any regrets?" Amelia asked one evening, her hand in his. Thorne was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Only that I did not find you sooner, that we did not have even more years together." "We have had a good life," she said contentedly. "Better than good, extraordinary." "Yes," he agreed, "extraordinary. All because I was in the right place at that snowstorm. All because you were brave enough to trust a rough mountain man with your heart." "You made it easy," she replied. "From the moment you wrapped me in your coat and lifted me onto your horse, I knew you were special. I knew you were mine. Always was, always will be." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, two people who had weathered every storm together and emerged stronger for it. Around them, the sounds of family filled the evening air. Grandchildren playing, children visiting, the continuation of the legacy they had built. When Thorne finally passed at the age of 78, it was peacefully in his sleep, Amelia beside him, as she had been for 52 years. She followed him 6 months later, unable to bear a world without him in it. They were buried side by side on a hillside overlooking their valley, the mountains standing eternal guard over their rest. Their children carved a simple marker: Thorne and Amelia Wolfe, united in love, forever in peace. But the real marker of their lives was not stone, but the family they left behind. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their legacy forward, who told stories of the mountain man and his brave wife, keeping the memory alive for generations to come. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispers through the pines, people swear they can feel the presence of that love still lingering in the mountains, the echo of a man who loved so deeply he walked into danger without hesitation. The memory of a woman who trusted that love would save her. Their story became part of the land itself, woven into the fabric of the place they called home. A reminder that even in the hardest times, in the wildest places, love can take root and flourish. That two broken people can heal each other and build something beautiful. that the choice to love every single day is the most powerful choice a person can make. The cabin still stands, maintained by descendants who understand its significance. Inside, the cradle Thorne carved for his firstborn son sits in a place of honor. The table where the family gathered for countless meals remains sturdy and true. The bed where Thorne and Amelia spent their nights talking and dreaming and loving is preserved as a testament to their devotion. People visit sometimes, drawn by the legend or simply curious about the mountain man and his family. They walk the land, see the view, try to imagine what life must have been like in that wild place during those wild times. The caretakers, always descendants of Thorne and Amelia, share the stories passed down through generations. They tell of the night the outlaws came, and how Thorne walked in quietly and took Amelia back before they woke, a rescue so skillful it seemed impossible. They speak of the love that grew from that crucible of danger, strengthening with each passing year. They describe a partnership built on mutual respect and unwavering devotion, a love that transformed not just two lives, but created a dynasty. Did they really love each other that much? Visitors often ask, skeptical that any romance could match the legend. More, the caretakers always reply. The legend cannot capture the depth of it, how they looked at each other even after 50 years like it was still the first time, how they moved together like two parts of one whole, how losing one meant the other could not go on. That kind of love is rare, but it is real. They proved it. And so the story endures, passed from generation to generation, a beacon of hope in hard times, a reminder that love can conquer fear, that strength comes in many forms, that the quiet heroism of daily devotion is as powerful as any dramatic rescue. Thorne Wolfe came down from his mountain for love and stayed for family. Amelia O'Brien trusted a solitary mountain man with her heart and never had cause to regret it. Together, they wrote a love story for the ages, carved into the stone and soil of Colorado, lasting long after they themselves had passed into legend. Their story proves that the wildest places can harbor the deepest love, that the hardest men can have the softest hearts, that terror can transform into triumph, that danger can become destiny, and that two people choosing each other day after day, year after year, can create something that lasts forever. The mountains remember. The wind whispers their names, and their descendants carry forward the legacy of that extraordinary love, ensuring that the story of Thorne and Amelia Wolfe will never be forgotten. In the end, it is a simple story. A man and a woman who found each other against all odds, who fought for their love and built a life together in the shadow of the mountains, who proved that real love is not just about grand gestures and dramatic rescues, but about the daily choice to stand together, to support each other, to create something lasting in a temporary world. That is the legacy of Thorne and Amelia Wolfe. Not just a rescue or a romance, but a lifetime of love lived deliberately and well. A testament to what two people can accomplish when they commit completely to each other and to the life they are building together. Their story is complete, their love proven, their legacy secured. And in the high country of Colorado, where the mountains meet the sky, their memory lives on, inspiring others to believe in the transformative power of love, to trust that even in the darkest moments, light can find a way through, and that choosing love, always and forever, is the greatest adventure of all.